Okay, thank you. Without further ado, I mentioned that this was writing new bits and pieces of writing. I was lying. He is, of course, our foremost and most renowned playwright of the city of Liverpool, and he is one of the most published and performed and produced writers and playwrights nationally and internationally to worldwide acclaim. He is, of course, our very own Mr. Willy Russell. Thank you.
That was very X Factor, wasn't it?
I love it, the steps. So I get to play a cross between Paul O'Grady and David Dimmock here. Okay, but it's mainly over to you.
I hope it's more the latter than the former, but there you go.
How do you feel about being archived? It sounds a bit Egyptian, doesn't it, like being mummified or something? But in terms of how it felt for you giving up, it's a life's work, really. I mean, it's a big decision.
It is, and I was a little bit wary of it when it was first mentioned to me about 15 years ago, and it was another university who first mentioned it to me, because it seems rather self-aggrandizing. The thought that you're saying this kind of stuff that you've generated all over the years should be put into this kind of academic kind of structure and for research and all those kind of important things that Robin was talking about. But at the same time, there's a professional side of me that understands that there is a curiosity out there about this stuff. At the same time, I married into a family that had a great streak of librarian running through it, and went on to grow and grow and grow. And there are so many librarians in my family now and archivists that it wasn't a kind of unnatural thing for me to think about. And at the same time, Michael Seagrote, who was my father-in-law, he began organizing all the papers in my office in about the mid-1980s, because you write these plays, they get produced here, there, everywhere. People send you, from their productions, the posters, the reviews. You amass all the the paraphernalia of this job of writing, which is often things like royalty statements, passionate arguments you've been having with people, love letters to actors and directors who've looked after your work, or so you think, and there's a kind of a massive stuff coming in, and Michael created this very basic, simple, crude, if you like, filing system, which was perfect for me. It was big boxes, each with the name of a play on it. And so 25 years subsequently, I was still using these boxes. So if something came in from Educating Rita out in Bolivia, I'd say to Helen or Jane, do me a favor, go up to the Rita box and slap that in. So these boxes were growing and growing and growing. And the whole kind of, the office walls were going out and with the massive kind of stuff. And I wanted to tidy up my office. So I came to JMU and they said, we'll take it all, and I've now got a tidy office. So.
I've got one box file in my mum's.
But she's looking after it for you.
No, I mean, it's a great thing. I mean, artists are notorious, aren't we, for, leaving our stuff around, not collecting and not preserving it.
Yeah.
It's really important. And the important thing to mention in this art is it's open, and that means it's for people to use. And I know that Willy was very, insistent that it didn't just lie collecting dust somewhere.
No.
It means that you, if you're a student, if you're a scholar, if you're just interested, you can make an appointment with the library and you can get the material out and have a look at it, and it's open to the public, which is fantastic. It's really generous.
The vast majority of it, some of it is embargoed, only because, not my own sensitivity, I don't care what you know about me, but there are some letters and stuff like that that would upset certain people because of the exchanges that go on. And as somebody said to me yesterday, you mean libel? So it's kind of...
Fantastic. We were talking about what we thought this would be and what it wouldn't be, and I know you were very keen it wasn't the usual Willy started, he left school without education, became a hair and blah, 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 and the stuff that most people know, really. And that you wanted to really talk about the work and your particular, how you feel about it now. But one of the things that we share an interest in and a love of, and you've always had a hugely muscular, strong control of, is your love of language, of written language, of spoken language, of the accent, of the vernacular, poetry, lyricism. How did you get that love of language? Where do you think that came from?
Probably initially from my mother reading me stories, from something as kind of, you know, as glorious and as mundane as that. But I say it because we still have pockets of kind of, existence where it just doesn't, you know, it's not considered important. But I think there's a point. It would take somebody more familiar with and versed in this area psychologically to kind of say it with more authority maybe. But I think there is a period between 0 and about 5 when you can be massively influenced in terms of language. And I think the act of reading, telling stories, singing to children is vitally important, you know.
And luckily for us, you made the leap and decided to start writing it down to form and shape it. How did that come? When did you think, I'm going to start writing this down and start to communicate with the world through this?
I think the first time I ever became aware of it was, I was 7 years old, I had to write a story in my class for Mrs. Duggan, I think it was, and I wrote this story, and it was because I'd been reading precociously lots of DC comics, and I was aware of narcotics in New York City. And so I wrote this story in which I used the word dope, and I had to get up to read it. I read it aloud to the class, and when I got to the word dope, everyone else in the class started wetting themselves with laughter because they thought I meant an idiot. And I meant drugs, man, you know. I was cool, I was 7, you know. So I started, but I realized at 7 that you've got to be very specific with language. That if you get it wrong, you know, it's a red herring. We'd recognize that in theatre now. Wrong laugh, we don't need that laugh. It's, the audience are hearing the word dope as idiot when it meant something else. I did become aware of language then, and I also, as much as the kids laughed, they enjoyed that story. Once they got over, you know, I knew that when I read a story out loud, I could get them. So I became aware, but I didn't think then I want to be a writer. That never occurred until I was 14, and I was reading a book by Neville Shute, I think it was, one terrible afternoon in Rainford Secondary School, county secondary, it wasn't even modern. And I was staring out at the prospect of my life working for Pilkington's Glass, you know, which is what the rest of the kids in 4D that don't know what to do with were going to do. And I loved being inside the world of this book and thought to myself then, I'd love to be able to do this. And then looking up and thinking, don't be a dickhead, you know. You've got nothing, you've got no qualifications, you'll never do anything like that.
Do you remember the decision to move on to, you know, to just extend the metaphor of the harder stuff in terms of what we might call a more literary types of work or self-conscious works of literature, and that started to inform the work?
No, I don't. I never made. There was a good thing in my house. My father was a great reader. My mother was a great reader. But the house didn't have the word literature in it. You know, we had books, and there were good books, and there were books not worth bothering with. And the good books included all kinds of massive kind of Catholic sweep of stuff that included, I mean, my father, if there was a hint of Noel Coward on the radio or the television, he'd come in with a lump hammer. I mean, he hated, because to him Coward represented something about class and that English kind of upper thing that completely dominated our lives. But at the same time, P.G. Wodehouse, he absolutely adored, you know. So there were all those kind of contradictions. Shakespeare wasn't part of my world. My first introduction to Shakespeare was on the back of a motorcycle being given a lift from Page Moss to Knowsley Village by a guy called Melvin Mosley, and he said, I saw this, and I thought he said film last night, and it was a play, and it was Romeo and Juliet, and he told me the story. I got off, I thought that's one of the most fantastic stories I've ever heard. I thought it was brilliant, you know. That was my first introduction to Shakespeare. So I had the kind, yes, I had what you call the elevated form around me, but I didn't know it was elevated. Probably the most elevated thing I became aware of was through John Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath.
Fantastic. Somewhere along the line, you stumbled onto Robbie Burns.
I did, because that was to do with my being involved in the whole kind of folk music thing and the folk circuit and being a singer-songwriter and all that. And I had a great friend called Davy Johnson, who had a collaborator called Titch Freer, a fantastic singer. And when I was my 21st birthday, it was this great soiree in Orton, up near Ormskirk, and there were loads of singers and people there. And Titch Freer was there, and I remember at some point, it was 23rd of August, at some point he recited the Burns poem, Tam O'Shanter, and I understood about one word in 15, because it's written in dense Scots and dialect Scots at that. But it was a bravura performance, and I really kind of wanted to that. So that led me into Burns. And of course, I discovered this fantastic poet. There is no equivalent in England. Robert Burns wrote in idiom, the vernacular, in dialect, and is revered as the great poet he is. There is nobody, I think, nobody in England who writes in idiom, in the vernacular. It's deeply still suspicious if you write in that way. It's not suspicious these days, but you'll never be considered really at the top of the game.
So much so that you decided to translate it into Scots.
It was the first thing. It was the first thing that I ever wrote, because I wanted to do what Titch did. I mean, I wanted to be able to read this poem to people, but I couldn't do it in the Scots because it's just so dense. So one day in 68, I put the closed sign on my hairdresser's shop, which I was then running solely, and went into the back room and started to do a translation adaptation of Tam O'Shanter.
Hopefully didn't leave someone under the dryer at the time.
No, I'd got rid of them.
Can we hear some?
Yeah, sure, you can hear the whole thing if you like. I've got to get this. They said, do your own stage work tonight, so I'm going to do it. And so this is this is going to be the only entire piece that I'm going to read to you tonight. So don't worry, because it might be a little long. The subsequent pieces are significantly shorter. And this is for those of you who don't know Tam O'Shanter, it's a cautionary tale on the evils of drink and the pitfalls into which it will leave you. And I wrote this when I was 21 years of age, warning the world about the pitfalls of drink. And I've spent 45 years ignoring my own advice. This is Sam O'Shanter. When work's done and dusted for another day, and the sky takes on a look of smouldering grey as thirsty bloke meets thirsty bloke, and the air in the bar starts to thicken with smoke. As we all sit there talking, perhaps about the match or even the latest, loveliest female catch, we think not once of the lonely roads that lie between us and our abodes, where sits a wife with a dinner grown cold. A wife who was long foretold that those who refuse to come to their senses will one day face the consequences. Oh, Sam, if you'd listened, if you'd used your brain, but your wife's warnings were all in vain. She told you no good ever comes of a boozer, that the drunkard always ends the loser. She told you no good would come of your drinking, that the devil finds mischief for those who go slinking from one pub to the next and coming home late. Your stomach, she said, more like a river in spate. She told her sister that your doom wasn't far off, that one night you'd probably drive the car off the road and die a drunkard in some miserable ditch where bogeyman, devil and fiend and witch would claim what's left of your sodden skin and bone before whisking you off and away to their foul, evil home. So, one night in a pub called the Keel and Anchor, there sits our hero, Mr. Sam O'Shanker, the fire roaring and blazing in the grate, lighting up the faces of Sam and his drinking mate, Bandy Billy, the cock-eyed cockle seller. Sam loves the company of this old fella. The pair of them just sitting there for ages, sorting out the world whilst drinking their wages. And this night is no exception to the rule. The fire hot and cheering, the Guinness rich and cool. And Mabel, the landlady's considerable assets, growing ever more attractive with every pint that passes. A song, Sam! Give us a song, she implores. And rising to his feet amid the shouts and the roars, Sam, the barroom Sinatra, has the whole pub singing. The glasses, the walls, the rafters now ringing with cheering and clapping, voices soaring and drowning out the howl of the roaring storm gathering and growling in the trees outside. But Sam has well forgotten the long and lonely drive that awaits him when all this drunken mirth is past. Forgotten that the warmest of nights can never last. So come, as always it does, the hour of closing time, to the final echoing strains of Auld Lang Syne. Sam and Billy bid each other a faltering fun. Ta-ra! Oh, Bandy Billy, tonight, how lucky you are, only living down this same street and needing no more transport than your own 2 feet, while poor old Sam now faces that solitary drive along pitch black country lanes before he'll arrive home to a reception guaranteed to be ice cool 12 miles away, back in Liverpool. Liverpool, which no other town reaches, for its curly-headed women, false tans and peroxide bleaches. In company a king, but alone just a mere man, Sam stumbles to the car park and his waiting van. A lightning shaft suddenly splits the sky apart and fear folds its fingers around Sam's beating heart. Sam has never been the bravest of men, and now, alone in the dark, he's just a child again. He turns the ignition, but the engine just splutters. He tries once again as he curses and mutters beneath his breath, threatening and then pleading and then warning his van, calling in a bleeding bin on wheels, an old piece of crap, and if it doesn't behave, it'll be for the scrap. And perhaps it's just coincidence. Can an engine have ears? A van have intelligence? Who knows? But with that threat of the scrapper's yard, the ignition catches, the engine sparked, and Sam pushes the pedal hard down to the floor, and the van pulls away with a shuddering roar. The wind whistling madly as the van battles on, the rain hurtling down, the thunder rattling on, along lanes hemmed in by billowing trees, down deserted back roads the old van speeds, past Wilkes's Wood, where they found the Boy Scout with his throat ripped open and his eyes gouged out, alongside the quarry where the fishermen found the mother and her newborn babies drowned, across Finnegan's Bridge where pickled Father McBain toppled over the wall and never preached again. For Sam, every lay-by, each junction and bend seems to mark the spot of some gruesome end. And with every blinding lightning flash, the countryside becomes awash with a whiteness stark and evil. Sam speeds through it all, poor devil. When ancient Knowsley village comes into sight, Sam, instead of turning the wheel right, turns it left, lest the police should put the flag up and make him blow their little bag up. Sam's drunk so much that well he knows one single breath would make it decompose. So to the left he turns the wheel, as up ahead the church bells begin to peal. Midnight, the time of all things dark and bad. Oh, Sam, poor Sam, you luckless, gutless lad. As the van turns down the side of Old Knowsley Church, the battered, weary vehicle gives a sudden, consumptive lurch. She falters and splutters and slows to a crawl before coming to rest alongside the church wall. Sam shakes his weary, bleary, drunken head. The engine is hopelessly, helplessly dead. He turns the ignition, but each time it's in vain, and outside the lashing rods of rain threaten a soaking for any would-be mechanic. Sam finds himself now starting to panic. How can he fix it? He's no engineer. His only flair is for whiskey, wine and beer. With a muttering curse, he climbs out of his seat, gets out of the van, and suddenly feels sulphurous heat, sees a light that glimmers in the graveyard's gloom. Then shadowy figures emerging tomb from tomb, shifting and swaying, a dance going on. Witches, goblins, ghouls, vampire, demon, all thrashing and writhing at some hellish grave, prancing and dancing from grave to gaping grave. Sam stands dumbstruck, mesmerized, unable to turn away his gawping eyes. For witches like these he's never ever seen in any fairy tale story or childlike dream. This is no ugly, bedraggled, haggard band. These witches no hideous, odious harridans. These are lithesome beauties, supple and slim, their bodies glistening and beguiling him as they dance throbbed together with brazen and bold, no sickly waltz or quick step strict and cold, but an urgent, quivering, rhythmic flow rippled each muscle from each head to each toe. And there, in the center of that throbbing throng, was the devil himself, head thrown back in song, his cloves carving screams from a black guitar, splintering notes like a wrecking bar, splaying shards of satanic tune upon the dancers. The urgent, reckless, writhing prancers, their hips like springs suddenly uncoiling, the atmosphere fizzing, spitting, bubbling, boiling. Sam's gaping gaze feasted at random until one dancer, even more full of abandon than the rest of her sisterly coven, came into view. Oh, Sam, was there ever a bigger fool than you? On this shimmering young witch, Sam glued his eyes, as to his delight and excited surprise she started to throw off her sweat-soaked clothes. And oh, now how Sam's blood pressure rose. Drape after drape she provocatively peeled, with every layer more and more revealed for any ogling, goggling eyes to see. Her only remaining claim to modesty, the bra and pants she seemed reluctant to lose. Poor Sam. Frustration perhaps, or merely the booze. Something now robbed him of what was left of his senses, and deaf to all thoughts of possible consequences. His voice rings out in a bellowing howl, "Get the rest off, love, you can't stop now!" In an instant, all light is suddenly gone. but every evil eye is fixed and turned upon the meddlesome intruder, that little man who scrambles now, trying to get to his van, but recalling with a rising sense of dread that the bloody engine is completely dead. Dead, the word echoes through Sam's brain. He turns the ignition again and again and again as the hellish legion, witches, devil and ghoul swarms in pursuit of the meddlesome fool. Sam prays, pleads, promises, begs his van to start, and is as if possessed of human heart. She finally responds, and Sam puts her in gear, begins to pull away, although still sick with fear because the ghoulish throng, shrieking and baying, is following the van. Sam frantically weighing how he might even now be able to find some way of leaving that hideous horde behind. And then he remembers the cockle seller's submission, the one that Sam had mocked as stupid superstition, that assertion that no otherworldly fiends dare cross a river or any running stream. What once spawned Sam's mockery now sires belief, and feeling the first rush of blessed relief, he remembers that place where, as a young colt, he used to jam-jar for sticklebacks on the banks of the Alt. Now the Alt, say some, is less a river and more a dribble. But in Sam's situation, who's going to quibble? If its Tesco trolley-blighted trickle can ward off the clamouring, babbling, advancing horde, then the River Alt is his chosen destination. That piddling stream, his one chance of salvation. As Sam pulls out onto Knowsley Lane, he glances in his mirror and sees again through the lightning's flash his ghoulish pursuers, that putrefied mire washed up from hell's sewers, some of them running, some half flying, and every one of them cackling, baying and crying, meddling fool, you could never be saved. Come back with us to the grave. Sam resolves not to turn his head and to keep his eyes fixed on the road ahead, urging the van to buck up and rise to the situation, to give him more speed, more acceleration. But though Sam's foot is pressed flat iron to the floor, the weary, worn-out van can barely do more than anything beyond 30 miles an hour. Her days of speed and strength and power all behind her now. No longer sporty, nimble or nifty. No more cruising bends at a nonchalant 50. No more turbocharged acceleration and the power to get out of a difficult situation. These days she's more akin to a snail or some poor fishing smack that fights the gale. Sam's van knows all that's left now is the reckoning, and that Otterspool Tip is already beckoning. But even though she knows this trip is the end, she still thinks of Sam, her driver, owner, friend, and determined now, just this one last time, to deliver him as she's always done in her prime. She summons from the depths of her ramshackled frame a final surge of strength, a last burst and flame spitting from her exhaust as she triumphs once more, speeding away and leaving behind the putrid core of followers, and off towards the Alt she tears, faster now than she's gone for years. Up in her cab, Sam Holland whoops and cheers, convinced now that salvation beckons. Oh, what a fool is the fool who never reckons with the guile of the ghoulish, the determination of beasts who are bent on denying salvation. Round the bend, the bridge looms into sight. Sam punches the air, tells himself now he'll be all right. only as he does so, he happens to glance in his rearview mirror and almost fills his pants. Coming up fast in the outside lane is a sleek and sporty black Ferrari FT40. In a flash, it's so close, Sam can see its bonnet, and his own half-clad witch now stood upon it. And behind the wheel, who should be steering but the devil himself, horn blasting and jeering as he eats up the road, and now gets so near that Sam screams out aloud in fear, the fiendish Ferrari relentlessly gaining, until, with only yards to the bridge remaining, the old van's last efforts finally take their toll, leaving her able to do little more than to shake and roll. Whatever reserves she's had, she's now spent them, left with nothing but the last scraps of her forward momentum to carry her to the bridge that crosses the stream, where suddenly the devil's laughter turns to a scream as he and his half-clad satanic daughter realize that the van is about to cross water, that it's gaining the bridge, is almost upon it, when screaming, the witch leaps from the bonnet and seizing the van's back bumper, she strains, eye-popping, cursing, and swollen-veined in her struggle to bring the vehicle to a halt and stop Sam and his van from crossing the Alt. And well she may have achieved her intention, had Sam ever been one to pay any attention to basic maintenance of his poor old van. But we know Sam was never that sort of man, which is why, as the witch waged her tug of war, the bumpers, corroded rivets, those that never saw oil or grease, rusted, encrusted threads all gone, started to snap off, to shear off one by one. The bumper ripped free as the rivets give way. The witch spitting curses as the van rolls away across the bridge in triumph to trump her, left holding nothing but the battered old bumper as Sam is carried safely beyond the running water, safe now from the clutches of the devil's daughter. Now any man too fond of the ale, let him hear Sam O'Shanker's tale, and spare perhaps a thought for a van that deserved to be driven by a better man. The kind of man that I know you would hate to unwittingly come to emulate. So if your wife declares you've had enough, just kiss her and thank her, and remember the tale of Sam O'Shanker. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's only one thing, isn't there, after that? So Robbie.
Cheers to Robbie Burns.
Right, so you're a poet, songwriter.
Not poet, no. I write verse. I honestly, I've never ever called. I don't understand poetry. I mean, I don't understand how you write poems. I look at Carol Ann Duffy's work sometimes, you know, I mean, many others, but, you know, I remember looking at a poem of Carol Ann's once and thinking, how do you do this? I genuinely do not know, because I think, if I'm anything, I'm a kind of versifier and lyricist.
Okay, for a non-poet, that's a pretty good impression, I have to say. I think
Thank you.
You're a musician, composer, now you're a painter. See this work?
No, I'm a student of painting. I insist on that.
All in all, sickeningly talented, right. White plays,
Why plays?
How did you get into writing dialogue?
Why plays? Well, like most, you know, when I was a kid and I realized that I want to write, I assumed that wanting to write was wanting to write novels, because I didn't go to the theatre, you know. Until I was 19, I never really went to a theatre. It wasn't, I mean, in our house, it wasn't, you know, there's that, I mean, I'll do it very quickly, that thing in Breezeblock Park where Ted says, "Don't talk to me about the theatre." I went to one once. We went to see, what was that thing we went to see? Waiting for Godot. That was it. We went to see this Waiting for Godot. Well, we got into this bloody place and they're all sitting there, all this audience, waiting for Godot. Right? He said, well, what I did was, you see, I got me programme and I opened me programme. And his name's not there in the Godot. I knew he wasn't going to show up. I went next door and had a cup of tea, left all those silly buggers waiting for Godot. And it's a risible. It's a risible kind of attitude, but there's something very positive about it as well. I mean, I was brought up with, like, you know, if you can work the plot out, don't bother wasting your time watching it. And so I've always been brought up with, you know, if I write something, I have to grab the audience, you know, I mean, that kind of instilled with that. But theatre it just wasn't the kind of thing that we went to, we bothered with. So when I thought I was going to be a writer, I thought I was going to write books, because that's where I got my stuff from, comics and books.
Terribly wrong for you.
And all went terribly wrong, because, well, I tried to write a novel, it was disastrous. By this time I'd gone back to college. I was at St. Cat's College studying drama main course in order to become a teacher. A production that RU was supposed to be doing, Ibsen's Peer Gynt, fell through. I tried writing a telly play, because I loved telly, and I said to one of the lecturers who was responsible for this evening that replaced a Peer Gynt of one actors and scenes from, and that kind of ensemble evening. I said, I haven't written a telly play, will you do a play of mine? And Fred said, if you bring it in and let me see. And I went home and thought, I haven't got a play, I better write one. So I sat down and I'd spent 2 years writing this awful novel about my years, like, you know, wanting to be a writer. I mean, it was a terrible piece of work. But I was playing at being at writing. But when I wrote this play, the second I began it, I knew how to do it. I knew how it worked. And it's not surprising, because none of my background was literary. My background was working class. You know, yes, we read books and that, but our conventions, our codes, it's not carried literally, in a literary way. It's carried in our oral way, you know. It's why I was probably deeply involved in songwriting and the folk song movement and all that kind of stuff, which is an oral tradition. And so, you know, playwriting is about speaking. If nobody speaks the bloody thing, then it doesn't exist, you know. A play is the script. It's an ambition for something. It's an intention. It doesn't exist until it lives with actors or with, you know, people speaking it. So I realized much later on, it was much more natural for me to be a dramatist than it was ever to be a novelist.
So we're kind of slipping into that thing we said we wouldn't. So
Yes. Yeah.
You get involved with the Everyman. You've met Alan Dosser. You've taken a dramatised version of Sound with some other plays, Blind Scouse to Edinburgh, Being Spotted. Obviously got some talent, not a poet, but can write a bit. And they've got hold of you. Just briefly, we'll have to. The world then explodes. I mean, it explodes for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, because I wrote Alan Dosser asked me, would I adapt a play that Contact Theatre Manchester were doing about the Beatles. He didn't know that I, you know, had been gone to the cabin when I was 14, you know, and seen the Beatles, and my life had been literally kind of changed. He didn't know any of that. But he asked me to go over to Contact, and I went over to Contact, and I saw this show, and it was, all the dialogue had been culled from biographies and stuff, and it was rather stilted and what, I don't mean to be demeaning, because it was a good piece of work. And Bernard Hill was playing Lennon in it. He was sensational. But I with all the arrogance that a young dramatist needs to survive, I said to Dosser, who was driving on the way back from Manchester, no, I won't adapt that. I'll either write a new one or I won't do anything. And he, you know, good on Alan, he came back and he said to his board, this arrogant prick says he'll write, and then when I wrote it, he went to the board and said, this double arrogant prick has written something that's actually going to cost us £1,000 to produce. And there was a crisis meeting of the board because it might have actually broken, you know. Anyway, I wrote this play about the Beatles, John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Bert. It opened, I was 26, Rob had just been born, I was teaching down in Shawfields, and it was like overnight, you know, this huge, became a huge thing. Ran at the Everyman for 8 weeks, which in those days was, did 120% capacity because Les the fireman, once it was rammed, used to let people in for 50p and used to have them all massed in at the back and that kind of stuff, you know. And then it transferred to London, and it ran in London for a year, and it was awards and it was all that kind of stuff, and it was like kind of rock and roll. You know, it was like you're suddenly up there and, you know, everybody wants a piece of it. I get offers to write the Rolling Stones story. I get, you know, all the predictable stuff, all that, you know. But fortunately, I was, you know, I've always had very, very good, strong people around me, most of them women, I have to say. And Peggy Ramsey, you know, was looking after me right from the off. And Peggy kind of, you know, was fantastic about how to protect yourself once all this kind of sudden fame thing happens. And she encouraged me, I think, to remain in Liverpool. I mean, I never thought I was going to hang around in London. It was kind of crazy. So I got through a difficult year, actually, because, you know, I was young, and it's very head-turning when all that kind of stuff happens.
Now,
so shall I apologise now for anything I did wrong during that period? That's what I thought you were leading to. I thought it was one of those loaded questions.
No, what I'm really interested in is, I think, in John Paul, George, Ringo, and Bert, there's an extraordinary decision as a dramatist, and it's really courageous. And people think it's obvious now. And I've looked at your career, and here's what my summation of your whole international huge success, right? You've got one woman playing the piano and singing. You've got one working class girl who wants to read and write. You've got a single mum and her kids. And you've got one bored and frustrated housewife. I think you owe the women of this country and this city quite a lot.
That's a very sly way of asking me the one question I said you shouldn't ask me because everybody has always asked it.
It's about performance, because that getting Barbara to do all the songs is like just getting that one female voice is a stroke of genius.
I had to fight like mad to get Barbara Dixon into John Paul, George, Ringo, and Bert. She was, Barbara was then working as a folk singer, and because I was on that circuit, I used to help arrange kind of, in those days you could play 30 folk clubs in and around the greater Merseyside area. And so prior to John Paul, George, Ringo, and Bert, Barbara was staying with us. I'd written my first Keep Your Eyes Down, and we'd used a Barbara track in it, a great song by Archie Fisher called The Chain, and we used it just on audio, you know. And I remember Barbara coming to see it in Edinburgh at the Fringe, and I said to Barbara, it'd be fantastic, you know, if we could use you in a play, much, you know, physically in a play. And then she came to stay with us when she was doing this little tour and playing places like the Pineapple Pub on Park Road, and the Cattle Market on Prescott Road, and Gregson's Well, and all those kind of places where there was this thriving kind of folk club singer-songwriter culture in those days. And I said to her, it'd be great if I could write this. Once I finish this thing that I'm working on at the moment, which was John Paul, George, Ringo, and Bert, maybe I'll write something that can. And I was thinking folk music with Barbara, which is stupid. And then at some point, Alan Dosser and Chris Bond said, we want to use, for the Beatles in your show, we want to use the band called Sticky George, a terrific band, but they should play the music. And I thought, this is going to be disaster, because in 1974, the Beatles themselves had never played things like the tracks from Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Rubber Soul, you know, they'd stopped talking. They were only album thing. And the technology in 1974, I know that you couldn't get the kind of technology that could make it sound convincing. So what I did was I persuaded them to go the other way, right? And to use Barbara sat at a piano with that stunning voice, strip it all down, and so we'd avoid the comparison with the Beatles. We weren't trying to do the songs the way the Beatles did them, you know.
And I think probably it probably would have been successful nowhere near. I think it really did.
No, I think it would have been a nightmare, because you know, we had this £1,000 budget that nearly broke the bank. I mean, there would have been nothing for the back line, and you know.
I know we weren't going to harp on about the woman thing, and we won't.
No, it's not. No. I mean, I wasn't dodging the question at all. You're right. I once picked up an award and I said, yeah, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for women. I mean, for the obvious, women have been very, 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 very good to me. But my point is, I don't know the answer to the question why you've written so many things that have got women at the centre of them.
Well, it's not just women. What I'm interested in, what we're interested kind of, in the university, and why I think the archive is really important, is because I know you don't necessarily see yourself as this, is because we're interested in people who move the form of drama on and bring something extraordinary to it. And what you brought into it, most plays have at their centre, or certainly have, a strong male character, and tend to be quite male skewed. And what you did at that time was extraordinary, was bringing different voices, and not just women. Actually, one of the really important voices that you brought in is young people as well, is actually put young people and their concerns and their voices front and centre stage, with some really extraordinary characters.
Yeah. I mean, it's something. The woman thing is mentioned a lot, but nobody ever really asks the question: why is so much of your work centered around childhood, or teenagehood? And I've written just as much. If you think of, The Wrong Boy, Blood Brothers, One Summer, Art. Things I did for television, like Break In, Lies, Boilers, Transistor Radio. There's something. I mean, I love writing. I love writing in a young voice. There's just something about the energy of the young voice that fires me, and gets me going. And obviously there was a time when I felt the same about the female voice. Maybe I still feel that.
Can we have a little bit
of the female voice?
No, let's have the young voice.
Okay, should we have a bit of, yeah, okay, bit of that, or a bit of Wrong Boy. Take your choice.
Let's go, because we'll come to Wrong Boy later.
Okay, right. Not at all. No, it's lovely to be thrown at googly. I love it. Sammy from Blood Brothers. Somebody asked me to. Somebody asked me to read this last week. I was doing a little thing.
Actually, it's Mickey's, isn't it?
It's Mickey's. Yeah. I was asked to do a little thing over at Peter Grant and Cathy's bookshop, and somebody requested it, and I didn't have a copy of this with me. I couldn't remember it, so I'm doing this for the bookshop where I couldn't do it last week. Here we go, if I can find it. Just to bear with me, because what Andrew didn't do is cue this up, so I've not. I've got it now. Okay. This is Mickey. And why I did this? I mean, you look at Blood Brothers and you think, the man's a dramatic nutcase. I mean, to bring this kid on and get him to do like a piece like this it's dramatically nuts. But sometimes you just have to do things because they feel right and they kind of work. And this is Mickey's first entrance in Blood Brothers. He's very young. I'm not rolling my kecks up and doing all that. I wish I was our Sammy. Our Sammy's nearly 10. He's got 2 worms and a catapult, and he's built an underground den. But I'm not allowed to go in there. I have to stay near the gate, because my mum says, I'm only 7, but I'm not, I'm nearly 8. I sometimes ate our Sammy. He dropped me toy car, And now the wheels are missing, and the top's broke off, and the bleeding thing won't go. And he said when he took it was just like that, but it wasn't, because it went dead straight. But you can't say nothing when you think you're 7 and you're not. You're nearly 8. I wish I was our Sammy. You want to see him spit? Straighten your eye from 20 yards and every time I hit. He's allowed to play with matches and he goes to bed dead late. And I have to go at 7, even though I'm nearly 8. Our Sammy, he draws nudie women without arms or legs or even heads in the baths when he goes swimming. But I'm not allowed to go to baths. My mum says I have to wait, because I might get drowned, because I'm only 7, but I'm not. I'm nearly 8. Our Sammy, what he sometimes does? He wheezes straight through the letterbox of the house next door to us. I tried to do it one night, but I had to stand on a crate because I couldn't reach the letterbox. But I will by the time I'm 8. Thank you. I'm really glad to do that.
You know, when will you get over this chronic shyness? It's really interesting. Your work is in some ways so rooted in the Liverpool voice, as you just did there, and in lots of ways it's not. What's your perspective on that, and how Liverpool has fed the work?
Well, Liverpool's fed the work absolutely massively. I think if I'd been born in Ashby-de-la-Zouch, I might have been a different kind of writer. I mean, to have, you know, to be born into this particularly gobby city, you know, is just wonderful. To have spoken, this is what I was hinting at before, you know, spoken language as a valued medium. I don't mean valued, again, in a necessarily academic sense, but to have it as, you know, wit and sharpness and all those things, just the way they are in New York, you know, the way they are in Marseille. There are certain pockets, most of them ports, most of them trading places, because people who trade have to be quick-witted, have to be able to use language in an immediate kind of catching. You know, the livelihoods depend upon language. So and I wasn't born into it. In fact, I'm a woollyback. I was born in Rain Hill. It doesn't say that anywhere in my biography, because when I was a young kid, Rain Hill was a very famous mental institution. And if you were like a kid, if I'd said Rain Hill, especially when we moved to Knowsley and into kind of Greater Liverpool, if I'd said Rain Hill, I would have been, you know, ripped to shreds, you know. Okay. So I said Wiston because I was born in Wiston Hospital. That's what I've always kind of hidden it away. But I think there's an interesting thing there, in so much as, like, my father, he was Wigan. He was born in Wigan, you know, well, up Holland even. And when he said he was going to town, he was going to St Helens, right? And my mother was Liverpool, so there was always that terrible dichotomy in our house. And I was aware of the outsiderness. And I think, and I've said this endlessly, I've always been slightly outside Liverpool as well as being of Liverpool. And I've not been, because my name is William Martin Russell, and I'm named after William of Orange and Martin Luther, out of spite. because my father found my Catholic grandmother trying to christen me at 6. He'd forsworn all religion, and to spite her, he took me across and had me christened William after William of Orange, Martin after Martin Luther. So I have none of the kind of Catholic thing that lots and lots and lots of the Liverpool writers have. There's another slight kind of distancing. So I've always had a slight separateness from it.
That's interesting, because people, I think, sometimes forget you write as many characters in all your works. You write strong voices who aren't from Liverpool. The teachers in RBL,
yeah,
Frank,
yeah,
Mrs. Lyons, they're all, you know, all the big works and kind of the Scouts works. There's strong voices.
Yeah. I mean, because I don't ever want to be, and I've never been, about Liverpool. You know, Liverpool is the setting for most of the work. But if you create work that only has meaning in Liverpool, then it's, you know, it's a small parish pump work. I mean, sometimes there's a need for it. If, you know, something particular is happening in Liverpool and somebody has to write a play about it, a problem play, because it's an issue that needs to be dealt with, that's absolutely fine. But it was never my intention to write plays about Liverpool that only had meaning within Liverpool.
Because right through from, you know, John Paul George, right through to Longboy, your characters spend an awful lot of time trying to get away from it as well, don't they?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been writing the same story since I began. It's just endless versions of the same story. It's like, you know, painters painting the same scene over and over and over again. It don't matter, you know, because you'll always do different things in that. I'm drawn to the same thing, and it's for me it was best summed up in a great Paul Simon song that's on, I think, his best ever album called Hearts and Bones, and he wrote this beautiful line: the thought that life could be better is woven indelibly into our hearts and our bones. The thought that life could be better. I mean, it's what propels us, you know. And drama, narrative, story, you know, has to be about change, has to be about quest, has to be about trying to achieve something or overcome something. So, you know, I've been driven by that particular engine. There are not that many engines around anyway, but that one's kind of, and I've never once set out to write anything that was about anyone trying to escape anything. It happens despite me.
Right. The thought that life could be better, that's interesting, and probably in its most pure and crystalline form is in Shirley.
And Shirley Valentine, absolutely. Yeah.
Should we have a bit?
A bit of Shirley?
Yeah.
I'd love a bit of Shirley. God, what was that?
I think that was the voice of Shirley.
That was the sound desk. Have we got, how are we doing for time? I don't want to keep you guys because we're all right. I can see certain people going out to the loo and the bar. They've completely forgotten what I told them about drinking. Oh, we started a bit late, right? Everybody arrived late, okay. All right, I'll just do a relatively short piece from Shirley Valentine. Oh, fine. Oh no, we're well done. We're well done. Shirley Valentine was. I say this for people who don't know of Shirley Valentine as a play. It was originally a play, not a movie, and it was a play that was written for a theatre not many yards away from where we are this evening, the Everyman Theatre, which was then in the hands of Glenn Walford, who's here tonight. And Glenn three-bottled of wined me into saying that I would write a play for her, which I then, I went through hell in order to try and write, and eventually, thank God, this woman came into my brain and onto my page, and she said, and I wrote the first line, I like a glass of wine when I'm doing the cooking. Now that wouldn't have made a play, but then she turned around and looked at the wall and said, don't I wall? And the second she said that, I kind of knew I had a play. And so I managed to finish this play, and we cast Noreen Kershaw, a wonderful actress in the role. And Noreen went on and did the play and got fantastic recognition, rightly, for this role. But then, prior to doing the play, I was out with Glenn in the old bistro. Lovely to see the Everyman, by the way, tonight, just walking past and seeing the lights on inside and all that coming back to life again. Fantastic. But in the old bistro days, we were having one of those liquid nights, and Glenn said to me, what are we doing about an understudy? And because in the play of Shirley Valentine, there are no other characters, there's only the role of Shirley. Everything is conveyed by her. I said, God, it would be a nightmare for anybody to have to understudy that role and never go on. So this is fourth bottle of wine. I go, if Noreen never has to go off, I'll come down and do it as a reading. Oh, for a superstitious man to say something like that is terrible, terrible folly. And so Noreen opens, it's an absolute triumph, and then there's an afternoon, I'm in my office, I get a call, and Glenn says to me, there's an ambulance disappearing down Hope Street. Noreen Kershaw is in it. They don't know what's wrong with her, but she is not going to be back at the theatre tonight. We've got a full house. Have you got your script ready? So I took very deep breaths, got my script, shot around. Glenn said, this is how we'll do it. We won't put you in a frock. We'll put your music stand on the stage, on the set, but we'll do it as a complete presentation of you reading the script, and we'll put signs all around the foyer saying, due to the indisposition of Miss Noreen Kershaw, the only thing we can offer you tonight is the author reading the play. If you don't want to go through this ordeal, you can have your money back. And so I'm backstage like, just after the half, Glenn comes back and says, oh, fantastic. So I said, how many are in? She said, rammed. The place is absolutely rammed. So I think, oh, not so bad then. You know, they all kind of... I only heard later that night, the whole of the audience was coach trips. And they'd all been dropped off, and the coaches had gone away by the time they read all this stuff. But I don't know this at the time, and I walk on and I say to the audience, look, do me a big favor, I'm not a 42-year-old woman, but if you believe that I am, and it was just borrowing something that Shakespeare does very often, you know, believe this, and then we will get there. And so I said that to the audience, and they believed it, and I did the play, and it was lovely, and I came off, and then we discovered that Noreen had got peritonitis, had been operated on, and wouldn't be back. And the play had just been extended by 2 weeks. And so it became this kind of crazy event where it was advertised, and I just kept going on every night doing the whole of the play, Shirley, Valentine. It became a kind of crazy theatrical event in its own right. And I'm delighted to say that at the end of that year, Noreen won the Echo and Daily Post Award for Best Actress, and I won the award for Best Supporting Actress. So don't let anyone ever tell you that the Echo's not capable of wit. Anyway, this is a little bit of Shirley, and this is she's in Greece. She's been taken there by her friend Jane. Her friend Jane has promptly buggered off to the other side of the island with a guy that she met on the plane going over. So immediately lost Feminist of the Year award, and left Shirley pretty much to her own devices in a hotel on a Greek island. After dinner, whilst everyone else was making their way to the bar, I went up to my room and I grabbed my light jacket and I walked out the hotel and into this lovely night outside. Well, that's when I met him. You know, Christopher Columbus. That's not his real name. His real name's Costas, but I call him Christopher Columbus. Bet you don't know why I call him that. It's because he's got a boat. Well, it's his brother's boat actually, and it's because we discovered it. The Lost Isle of Clitoris. I'm terrible, aren't I? I suppose you think I'm scandalous. Married woman, 42, got grown-up kids. I suppose you think I'm wicked. Jane does. Shirley, she said, you're acting like a stupid teenager. I suppose the next thing you're going to tell me is that the earth moved. Moved, said Jane. I thought there'd been an earthquake. It was at least 0.9 on the Richter scale. Oh, spare me the details, she's going. Spare me the details. Well, she wasn't half jealous. But you see, it wasn't my fault. If she hadn't disappeared for 4 days with the walking groin, I never would have met Christopher Columbus. He kissed me stretch marks, you know. He did. He said they were lovely because they were a part of me and I was lovely. He said stretch marks weren't to be hidden away. They were to be displayed, to be proud of. He said my stretch marks showed that I was alive, that I'd survived, that they were marks of life. Aren't men full of shit? But the thing about him, the thing about Costas was, when he gave you a load of guff, he believed it. What was marvellous about him was, he never made you feel at all threatened. And he understood how to talk with a woman. That's the first thing I noticed about him, because, you know, most men, really, they're no good at talking with women. They don't know how to listen, or they feel that they have to take over the conversation. But it wasn't like that. When I came out the hotel that night, I just walked down the little esplanade. There was hardly a soul about, but I noticed the light was on in the taverna, and outside the front of it, there's these tables with white parasols. Well, I'm sitting there, and he come out to serve me. Excuse me, I said, I know this sounds a bit soft, but would you object if I moved this table and chair over there by the edge of the sea? Well, he looked at me for a minute. He said, do you want to move the table and the chair to the sea? What for? You don't like here at my bar? Oh yeah, it's a lovely bar, but I've just got this soft little dream about sitting at a table by the sea. Ah, he said, and then he smiled. A dream. We move this table to the edge of the sea, and it make your dream come true. Yeah, I said, yeah, I think so. Then is no problem. I move the table for you. And tonight when I serve in my bar, I say to customer, tonight I make someone's dream come true. Well, I thought for a second he was being sarcastic, because in England it would have been. But no, he carries the table and the chair over, and he brings me out this glass of wine that I've ordered. Well, I paid him, and I thanked him, but he said to me, no, I thank you. You enjoy your dream. And then he gave me a little bow, and he was gone back to the taverna, leaving me alone with the sea and the sky and my soft little dream. Well, it's funny, isn't it? But you know, if you've pictured something, you know, if you've imagined how something's going to be, made a picture of it in your mind, well, it never works out, does it? I mean, for weeks, I'd had this picture of myself sitting here drinking wine by the sea. I even knew exactly how I was going to feel. But when it got to it, it wasn't a bit like that. Because when it got to it, I didn't feel at all lovely and serene. I felt pretty daft, actually, and a bit stupid, and awfully, awfully old. What I kept thinking about was how I'd lived such a little life. And one way or another, even that would be over pretty soon. I thought to myself, my life's been a crime, really. A crime against nature. Because I didn't live it fully. I'd allowed myself to live this little life when inside of me there was so much more that I could have lived a bigger life with. But it all gone unused, and now it never would be. Why? Why'd you get all this life when it can't be used? Why'd you get all these feelings and dreams and hopes if they can't ever be used? That's where Shirley Valentine disappeared to. She got lost in all this unused life. And that's what I was thinking, sitting there on my own, staring out at the sea, my eyes open wide and big tears splashing down from them. I must have sat there for ages because the noise from the hotel bar had died away. And even the fella from the taverna was locking up for the night. He came over to collect my glass. It was still full. I hadn't even taken a sip. He saw that I was crying, but he didn't say anything. He just sat down on the sand and stared out at the sea. And when I'd got over it, when it was all right to talk, he said, dreams, we don't find them in the places they're supposed to be. I just smiled at him. Come, he said, I escort you back to your hotel. And he did, and he told me his name was Costas, and I told him my name was Shirley. And when we got to the door of the hotel, he said to me, tomorrow you want to come with me? I take my brother's boat, we go all around the island. I just shook my head, no. I said, it's all right, you've been dead kind that it is, thank you. He said, no problem, I come for you early. No, I'm going, thanks. You afraid? He suddenly said, no. I said, but you afraid? He said, you afraid I try to make folk with you? I didn't know where to put myself. But he just laughed. Of course I like to folk with you. You're a lovely woman. Any man be crazy not to want to folk with you. But I don't ask to folk. I ask you want to come my brother's boat. Is different thing. Folk is folk, boat is boat. I come, I fetch you tomorrow. I bring wine, I bring food, and we go tomorrow. I just make you happy. No need be sad, no need be afraid. I give my word of honor. I don't try to folk with you. Well, what could I say? I'll see you in the morning then. Of course, the next morning, I've just got dressed. I'm sitting in my room. There's this knocking on my door. I thought, oh Christ, he's come up to my room. Well, I opened the door, and guess what? Jane's back. Shirley, please forgive me. I know I shouldn't have left you, Shirley. I know I've been over, but please forgive me. I'll make it up to you. Come on, it's still early. Let's go and hire a car and drive out around the island. Well, what could I do? I mean, she paid for me to be there. If it hadn't been for Jane, I never would have been in Greece in the first place. She keeps asking me if I forgive her. Of course, I forgive you, I said. And she threw her arms around me then. Come on, she said, let's put it all behind us. Let's make today the real start of our holiday. I know you've had an awful time, and Shirley, I'm sorry. Have you just been sitting here in your room the past few days? I know you. Without me being here, I suppose you've just been sitting talking to the wall, haven't you? Well, I thought to myself, how does she see me? Does she think I'm an old age pensioner or a 5-year-old child? I'll only be a few minutes, you're saying. I'll just pick up a few things from my room. Well, it was just as she got to the door that there was another knock on it. She pulled it open and Costas was stood there. She took one look at him and said, what is it? Room service? Did you order anything, Shirley? But Costas just walked straight past her and into the room. Shirley, you come, you're late, I wait for you on the key. I already put the wine, the food on the boat. I stand, I wait, and then I think, oh, Shirley and me, last night we get to bed so late. She must have overslept. Well, the look on Jane's face could have turned the milk. Quickly, you get ready. Don't bring much clothing. I wait for you on the key. Hurry. And as he passes Jane, he just goes, apology for interrupt you. Now you continue clean the room. I steered the boat, you know. See me on that bridge, natural. I mean, I knew I wasn't the first woman on that boat, and I certainly wouldn't be the last. But I knew I was with a good man. I knew that whatever happened, he wouldn't take anything from me. We sailed for miles and miles, and we talked properly. And we didn't half laugh. We liked each other. And isn't it funny? But if you're with someone who likes you, who sort of approves of you, well, you like start to grow again. You move in the right way. Say the right thing at the right time. And you're not 18 or 42 or 64. You're just alive. And I know if I could have seen myself that day, I would have said, look at that lovely woman riding on the sea. Look at that lovely woman. Isn't she alive?
Thank you very much. Talking voices, I think we've got time for one more, and we'd like to hear it because it's from the novel, from the long book.
Have we got time for that?
Yeah, well, you know what, we can do it, we're here, aren't we?
Well, it's up to you guys. Or we could wrap it up pretty quickly with a little tag.
Just do a
little tag
from the wrong boy.
Okay, all right. We'll do a little bit from the wrong boy. The wrong boy, I need to set it up very, very quickly. The Wrong Boy is a novel that I wrote. It came out in the year 2000. It doesn't use a Liverpool voice. For those of you who don't know it, it uses the voice of a 19-year-old lad from Failsworth in Greater Manchester. And Raymond is one of those kids who, I had a letter from one, so like Raymond today. One of those kids who has a fantastic relationship with his gran. His mum's lovely, but you know, the way this kind of thing sometimes happens is it's easier sometimes for kids to have relationships with their grandparents rather than their immediate parents for certain periods of their lives. And it's certainly true of Raymond. And I'll just, as a kind of outro for this evening, give you just a little bit of Raymond and Raymond's gran. When I wrote The Wrong Boy, I had Pauline Collins wrote me a very, very passionate letter. It might be in the exhibition, actually, saying that she wanted to play Raymond's gran in the movie. Well, we've never made the movie, but maybe one day. My gran said that I was the only grandchild of hers that she liked. She said she couldn't abide Mark and Sonia. That's why my gran never took either of my cousins to any of her special places that she took me to. My gran said that Mark and Sonia were just a pair of whingers and whiners. I said they weren't all that bad really. But my gran said that Mark and Sonia were the sort of kids who'd make a paedophile eat his own sweets. And that's why my gran would never take Mark or Sonia when we went for picnics at the cemetery. My gran loved going for a picnic at one of the cemeteries. We visited them all, apart from the cemetery where my granddad was buried. My gran hated my granddad. Even after he died, she still wouldn't show no sympathy for him. She said the lecherous old bastard fully deserved the dark demise that his lustful leanings had led him to. My granddad had fell off the roof trying to fit a satellite dish so that he could watch lewd films and pornographic game shows beamed in from the continent. Everyone said as how he shouldn't try and fit it himself and he should get a qualified fitter on the job, but the earliest an aerial fitter could do it was the following Tuesday, and my granddad's libidinous longing to look at continental pornography made him far too impatient for that, and so against all advice he decided to indulge in a bit of DIY. And he did manage to get the dish fitted onto the chimney, only as he did, he became so excited by lascivious thoughts of the European erotica that would soon be beaming down the dish. He missed his footing, fell off the roof and broke his neck. He'd done a brilliant job with the satellite dish though. My gran was sat there in the front room watching a Belgian documentary on food and sadomasochism under the impression that she was watching Welsh Channel 4. When my granddad fell screaming from the roof, my gran just ignored it, thinking it was from the soundtrack of the film where a fellow was flagellating himself with a Jerusalem artichoke. By the time my gran switched off, having learned a few tricks with chili peppers and courgettes that Delia Smith's never dreamed of, my granddad was just a crapped out cadaver on the patio. He lived by lust. He died by lust, my gran always said. You are too young to understand that now, Raymond, but you will do one day. I did understand though, because when I'd been in the last year of the infant school, my granddad had suddenly offered to walk me to school every day. My mum thought he was just being nice in his old age and trying to get to know his grandchild. But he only did it because he wanted an excuse to get to know the lollipop lady who worked on the dual carriageway. He always stopped and talked to her, and it always made me late for assembly. He was always cracking jokes with the lollipop lady, telling her that what she needed was a real lollipop and he had just the very thing for her. In those days, I was too young to know what a metaphor was, but I knew what a pigging lollipop was. I used to get dead embarrassed. But then, after a bit, the lollipop joke stopped, and whenever we got to the crossing point, the two of them would just gaze longingly into each other's eyes. And instead of holding my hand to cross the road, the lollipop lady held me granddad's hand, and I had to find my own way through the bleeding traffic. But then this one day we got to the crossing, and instead of the lollipop lady gazing lovingly up into my granddad's eyes, she lifted up a lollipop and battered shite out of him. It seems that someone had apprised her of the fact that my granddad was also sharing his lollipop with the bisexual dinner lady from St Bernadette Perpetual Suckers Comprehensive. Me and my granddad always had to walk up the hill and cross at the Pelican Lights after that. And then he fell off the roof, and the vicar said to me gran it was a tragedy. But my gran said, tragedy my arse, she said. When he hit that patio, it was the start of my life. And my only regret is that we didn't have satellite television 30 bloody years earlier. The vicar blinked and said that perhaps they should move on and discuss which hymns my gran would like to have sung at the funeral. My gran said, oh, happy day and glad that I live, am I? They don't understand, you see, Raymond, she said, after she'd shown the vicar out. They don't understand what I've had to put up with for all these years. Tragic, I could tell that bloody vicar about tragedy. You know my tragedy, don't you, Raymond? Yes, Gran, I said. Your tragedy is that you're never a mediocre woman, but you're forced to lead a mediocre life. That's right, she said. That's right. I lived a mediocre life, and all because of him. I met him, didn't I? I married him. Him with his fun. Let's go to Blackpool, Vera. Let's go to Blackpool and have fun. Him, he loved fun. He always loved having fun, but me, I hated bleeding fun. I hated candy floss and Arthur Askey. and the hula hoop, and bastard bleeding butlins and balloons and pratfalls, and Charlie chuffing Chaplin and sing-alongs on charabangs, and the hokey sodding cokey fun. I never wanted fun, I wanted joy, but he could never see it. My gran carried on looking away into the distance for a moment, and then she stubbed a fag out and started collecting up the dishes from the table. You know what Thomas Hardy said, don't you, Raymond? About Tess of the D'Urbervilles, don't you? She was a victim of the most common tragedy of all. She married the wrong man. My gran stood there, nodding solemnly, with the dishes in her hand. And when he wrote those words, Raymond, Thomas Hardy could just as easily have been talking about me. I picked up the cups and the saucers then, and I followed my gran through to the kitchen. You know, I should have married, don't you, Raymond, she said. Yes, Gran, I said, you should have married Jean-Paul Sartre. That's right, my gran said, that's right. Jean-Paul Sartre, that's who I should have married. I could never read his books, but you could tell from his picture. There was nothing frivolous about Jean-Paul Sartre. Thank you.
And John, thanks. We're sadly way over time, who cares? I've got thanks to do for One Cruise in the Art School and all the students who helped set up the archive, the art students and set up the display. Please have a look at it before you leave. To our events team, to the fantastic Jessica Smith, who led the line in getting this. Has been the sort of lead archivist who's been sorting us out, or looking us out really. Doss Stevenson for Sheena Strebber and for our archive and library services, who are fantastic, for Ros Merkin from the drama department, and for all of us in drama who had a long relationship with Willy and were instrumental in talking him to bringing this stuff over. Our fantastic tech team who stepped in to help us out. And to the History of Art students who all work on the project with the national tutor, and for our graphics students as well, who help with the exhibition booklet. Now then, as you leave, there are students available, and you can have student guides to show you around the archive as well, and they will make themselves known and wave at you, and we are very nearly done. Thank you for bringing.
Thank you for a lovely evening.
Nice. Bringing all your work, and thank you from all of us here, and from me actually, because apart from doing all this, Willy is hugely active in the drama community and has supported me, helped me out of some scrapes over the years, and has done so for lots of writers and all the people, lots of people who work in the industry, and other people besides. I won't embarrass them by going any further.
It was all illegal anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And it's made a massive contribution, not just to with this drama output, but to the very fabric of this city. A little token of which we would like to show our appreciation for. I'd like to invite Carl and Professor Leatherbarrow. I'm not sure what it's about champagne, don't get too excited. To make a small...
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Oh wow. It's a wine glass. Fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Andrew got the bottle, I got the glass, so we're going to go swimming now.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to see us at Liverpool John Moores University. As I say, please have a look at the exhibition, and you're welcome to come in and come and see the archive. And once again, let's show our appreciation for the fantastic guest.
Thank you. Andrew, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back. Thank you.